Good, straight on to actually one of my favorite European cities, Brussels. Now, Brussels has a bit of a roaring high-rise history because it really started to build high-rise almost ferociously in the 1950s and the 1960s. And as such, it really was one of the leading high-rise cities in Europe. Almost up to a point that it possibly could have shocked the city, and after that there really was a long period in which high-rise was not being part of the skyline anymore. Today with us we have the International Belgium Associated Architects from Brussels, who wrote in their introduction that at this moment Brussels is possibly one of the most active high-rise cities in Europe. So they didn't bring one but two people with us to tell us more about it. Those two people are Josse Wayembergh, but we start off with Mr. Isidore Zielonka. Welcome.
So how do we do that? Okay, we'll talk about Brussels, but certainly not about high-rise building, because if in the 60s in Brussels was built one of the highest building, which was 150 meter, very shortly after, the French Montparnasse tour took the lead. In fact, what we would like to show you today, leave it like that, is the old city of Brussels, which has, we were presented before, has been a leading city having a tower, but I would like to share with you the reason of that. In the 60s, as all the city these days wants to show up having a large number of towers, Brussels had the same idea, looking to the United States and having some dreamers that were intending to develop similar things. Now the problem is that you all believe Brussels to be a city. In fact, Brussels is not a city. It's a gathering of 19 boroughs, which each of them are, at that time at least, in 1960, totally independent. That means that the developer that came in front of these 19 communes were able to discuss with them, and without any agreement between them, each one wants to be the first having a tower. So the tower gets anywhere. We will talk about two of them today. But before that, I'd like to share with you an image which was the dream of one of the largest developers in Brussels in the 60s. He had the intent of building there a World Trade Center, which was built. Two of these towers have been built in the 60s. The 8 others that were planned were never built, and the reason for that was that he has had the intent of developing that on a piece of land that was shared between 3 of these boroughs. So he had agreement with one, not with the other, and it's only lately, in the late 90s, that the whole city was built not the way he wanted, because he expected the people to walk at 13 meters for height, the 3 first levels being a sort of upper garden. Now, one of the buildings that we would like to discuss a little about was built in 65.
No, just in introduction. One of these towers that is, as you can see, fantastic landmark in creativity, was built in 65 and it's 34 stories. And that is a landmark in Brussels, top part of Brussels. And we have been to support that in front of our eyes until early 2000. And then we were committed to remodel it, and that will be explained a little bit later.
When I was in college at that time, that building was quite amazing because it was one of the first buildings that raised up on 1 meter, 2 meters a day. So every day you was passing by, the central core was coming up. In the 60s, that was really something that was never seen, at least in Europe. Now the other one is a steel building. It was developed also in the mid-60s in the center of Brussels, in the low part of Brussels. and it's overlooking the central part of it, the historical part. It was developed as an hotel. And the nice thing there was that the hotel had a marvelous view overlooking the Grand Place. And that's maybe one of the reasons of what we will be talking today. Now, it looks like we have a lot of skyscrapers, but they're only between 100 and 150 meters. The highest building in Belgium is the tower that was built in 1967, if I remember well, which is 150 meters. And out of the 15 highest buildings in Belgium, which are higher than 100 meters, 14 are in Brussels. The 8 buildings that were supposed to be built in, yes, I have the mouse here. This is the World Trade Center, which was designed and built in 1965. And then the other ones are coming later based on the same plan. So Brussels today, or this area of Brussels at least, has been designed in 60. So this is not really taking into account the future. No, Brussels is a very special trend. The center is in the low part. This is the Grand Place. And the highest tower is being built in the lower part of Brussels. So that means that it's the 120-meter high building, which is located along the perimeter of Brussels, that is the highest point. One of the reasons that it would be quite interesting to redevelop that tower, and that's one of the things that we will show you today. Now, in the 60s already, fortunately, there were some small rules that nothing should be seen from a pedestrian in the Grand Place, and that the skyline should remain what it was in the 12th century. Now, here you see that from above, nowhere above, the skyline is not exactly like in the 15th century. Now, in order to change that, there has been a rule which was led by the former Brussels mayor, but honestly it was not him that was leading that. It was his intent to get the Grand Place protected by UNESCO. And UNESCO said, well, if that's the case, we have to be sure that it will be protected. So they end up deciding that it's not on the pedestrian level, but on the balcony of the main hall that you wouldn't be able to see any more towers. Now, the one that we will talk about has to be cut down by 8 floors. Now, this is the one. It's the hotel. At that time, it was already being remodeled into offices. And we were asked to look how to do that. The problem was that in order to take out 8 floors, that means also taking out a lot of space, and being just above the central station of Brussels, above a metro station, it was a perfect location to get a lot of people coming working there. So the city on one side, and the developer, of course, asked us whether it was possible not to lose space, and if possible, to increase that space, having 8 floors lower. So we end up doing it. I'll not go into the detail, but it was also developed under pressure of something that we will talk a little later, is the market needs. Now, the advantage of that change is that the skyline on the other side of the city where the cathedral is has also changed. Instead of the hotel being the major point on that part of the city, the cathedral comes again the real nicest point to be seen. Now, on the pedestrian level, what we also tried to achieve was an integration with the volume and the size of the old buildings that are around that place. The other project, so this project that we just talked about was located here. The other one is on the top of the hill, is there, and I'll leave you to explain that one.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, as we told that before, this masterpiece has been designed in '65, and we had to bear it in front of our eyes until early 2000. It is a 34 floors building with multi-tenants, and we have been requested to remodel it completely, including taking into account the surrounding environment. This is the existing situation in '65 up to the late 90s. You see the tower in yellow. The yellow, where is the yellow base here? And this tower, more than 100 meters high, was just next town houses, 3 floors high, very specific to Brussels with earth roofs. So the idea was to remodel with the agreement of the city and the neighbors here, to remodel the complete area in order to produce something which would be more consistent and better integrated in the environment. And this is the proposal that has been done and accepted by the municipality and by the real estate company. So what we have done is just to remodel the whole area and redevelop the tower completely with giving the tower curved facade and different shapes in volume. The idea was to bring different shapes in order to counter the wind effect, which is very strong in this area. And we made a model of the project, and we made a study about the wind action, and that came to the conclusion that we should make overall volume divided into 3 different levels. First level is 7 floors, the second level goes up to 13, and then the whole building goes to 34 again. That is the result you can see on the left side of the picture, the windmill. Okay.
No, one of the facts that has led these buildings to be remodeled is the fact that the European community, since the 70s, has begun to grow in Brussels. And what I've heard these last 2 days is in somewhat interesting, because Brussels is on the lead for the moment to change that system where it's the tenant that decide what has to be built. Now, it needs a little story here. The European community has issued about 10 years ago, even 15 years ago now, a book which is called the Blue Book in Brussels. It has no, it's not to be followed as a regulation, but everybody knows that if you want to have a tenant of one of the community group, you better try to reach those things. Now, what is mainly driving it? It's mainly driving the fact that they want their people to work in a good environment, and they want their people to be as close as possible to good buildings, or in good buildings. No, the private, and this is a private developer, whether they want it or not, had to follow these rules even for the buildings that are known not to be rented by the European community. This building is located in the center, above the central station. The European community is in another side of the city, and it is obvious that they will not come and rent that building. But no one's want now to rent a building that is not at the level of the same level that the European community in Brussels have asked people to develop. So that means that we need to implement as a maximum as possibility daylight, that we need to have clear windows, that we need to have openable windows, that we need to have shading for the sun. And this building, for example, was developed with the idea of having a double-skinned ventilated from the outside. Now, also, for comfort reason, they are pushing, not necessarily because there are other systems that are accepted, but they are pushing to have radiating ceilings to decrease the energy consumption. Now, the other building was also developed with the same rules, but differently.
Yes, actually, we use the same rules, but in this case, we use the double skin, which is, refreshed from inside. You can see the hair, the cold hair inside, and that goes through the double skin and goes into the system again, and then it's cooled. That gives also that the using of clear glass gives a very nice and internal environment and aspect. Yeah.
And that building also has openable window, but the traditional way. This is a third project, which is also led by tenant request. It also shows that with a good coordination between the city, because all the cities now are more linked together. Since the 90s, there is a common group coordinating town planning in Brussels, in the 19 Brussels community. Here we are on the corner between two of them. The plaza is on one and the building is on the other. Now, having organized meetings with everybody and showed that we could do there a building that would be respectable, that would respect a certain number of things, like recreating the plaza, being in accordance with what is today the atmosphere, and putting new elements like a treatment plant that is the first one in Brussels, reusing totally the wastewater. The building that was supposed to be, due to planning permission, 55,000 square meters, because of all of that and things that were given by the contractor or by the developer to the city, we end up with a building of 70,000 square meters. That means that there is a deal possible between the cities and the developer if we are going into a new direction. This was developed 5 years ago, and at that time it was very, very difficult for us to convince the developer to have in-house a total sewage system. Now, one of the ways to do it was that the internal atrium is part of the system. The wastewater is treated biologically, and the end treatment is done by the plants themselves, which are part of the development and give value of this building. Now, we have also done other things.
Yes,
not on high rise.
Yeah, yeah. No, the problem, as you can see in Brussels, is very difficult to get high-rise buildings. So what we have done for about 12 years now is trying to develop sustainable techniques in different kinds of projects, and this is one of them, using photovoltaic panels on the transom for the windows. And luckily enough, we can go a little bit outside of Brussels to give more freedom to our creativity. And this is what we do outside central Brussels. And this is one of the projects. Another one is we have been honored to design the new NATO center in Brussels together with SOM USA. And so this gives us the opportunity to make a better expression of creativity And hopefully the rules will be changing in Brussels, and there are some kinds of discussions presently going on in order to allow the architects to produce a little bit better than has been produced till today. Thank you very much for your attention.